She woke up before the alarm rang, the way she always did on days that mattered too much. The small room was quiet, except for the soft sound of traffic far away and the slow ticking of the clock on the wall. For a few seconds, she lay still, staring at the ceiling, letting the weight of the day settle on her chest. Today was not just another interview. It was the final one. The last door between her and a life she had been chasing for years. She sat up slowly and looked around the room. Everything she owned fit into this small space. A narrow bed, a wooden chair with one loose leg, a tiny table covered with books and notes. On the wall near the window hung a framed photo of her mother. The photo was old, the colors faded, but the smile in it was still warm and strong. She reached out and touched the edge of the frame. She did every morning. "Today is the day," she whispered. More to herself than to the picture. She walked to the window and pulled the curtain aside. Morning light poured in, pale and soft. The city was waking up. People hurried to buses, shops opened their shutters, and life moved forward without knowing how important this day was for her. She took a deep breath and tried to calm the nervous flutter in her stomach. On the small table lay her interview clothes, carefully ironed the night before, a simple, light-colored shirt and a dark skirt. Nothing expensive, nothing fancy, just clean, neat, and proper. She had chosen them carefully, knowing first impressions mattered more than people liked to admit. Still, her eyes moved past the clothes to the small velvet pouch beside them. Her hand paused above it. She knew what was inside, without opening it. She had known since she was a child. The bracelet. She sat down on the edge of the bed and picked up the pouch. Her fingers trembled slightly as she opened it. Inside lay a thin silver bracelet, dull with age, its surface worn smooth in places. It was simple, almost plain. No stones. No shine that caught the eye. To anyone else, it looked cheap, like something bought from a roadside stall. To her, it was everything. Her mother had worn it every day, to work, to the market, even at home while cooking or cleaning. When she was tired, when she was worried, when she was smiling, the bracelet had been there through all of it. As a child, she used to play with it, sliding it up and down her mother's wrist while listening to stories before bed. Her mother used to say, it was not about how much something cost, but what it meant. She closed her eyes and memories came rushing back. Her mother waking up before sunrise, tying her hair back, getting ready for another long day. Her mother counting money carefully, making sure there was enough for rent and food. Her mother smiling even when life was hard, pretending not to be tired so her daughter wouldn't worry. They had never been rich, not even close. There were days when meals were small and choices were painful, but her mother never complained. She always said, "We have enough. As long as we have each other, we are rich in the ways that matter." When her mother fell sick, everything changed. The days grew heavier. The nights grew longer. Hospital visits replaced school meetings. Medicines replaced little treats. Through it all, her mother still wore the bracelet. One night, when her mother was very weak, she had called her to the bed and taken the bracelet off her wrist for the first time. "Keep this," her mother had said, her voice soft but firm. "Wear it when you feel afraid. Wear it when people doubt you. Promise me you will never feel ashamed of who you are or where you come from." She had promised through tears. Her mother passed away not long after. The bracelet had stayed with her ever since. Now, holding it again, she felt the familiar mix of comfort and fear. Comfort because it reminded her she was not alone. Fear because she knew how people judged. She had seen it before. The looks, the quiet smiles, the unspoken thoughts. She stood up and walked to the mirror. She put on her clothes slowly, carefully. She brushed her hair, tied it neatly, and checked her reflection. She looked calm on the outside. On the inside, her heart was racing. Her eyes fell to her bare wrist. She picked up the bracelet and slipped it on. It rested lightly against her skin. Cool at first, then warm. She stared at it for a long moment. Part of her wondered if she should leave it behind. Just for today. Just to avoid questions. Just to fit in better. But she remembered her promise. She straightened her shoulders. "No," she said softly. "I won't hide you." She grabbed her bag, checked her documents one last time, and stepped out of the room. The walk to the bus stop felt longer than usual. Every step echoed with her thoughts. What if she failed? What if they didn't like her? What if she wasn't enough? She shook her head. She had come too far to let fear win now. The bus was crowded, as always. She stood holding the railing, careful not to crease her clothes. She caught her reflection in the window, the bracelet visible on her wrist. A woman beside her glanced at it, then looked away. She didn't know if it was judgment or curiosity, but it made her grip her bag tighter. When she reached the building, she stopped for a moment outside. It was tall and modern, glass shining under the sun. People in sharp suits walked in and out with confident steps. This was the place she had dreamed about, studied for, worked toward late into the night. She looked up, swallowed, and walked in. Inside, everything felt quiet and serious. The floors gleamed. The air smelled faintly of polish and coffee. She gave her name at the front desk and was directed to the waiting area for final candidates. Several people were already there. Men and women, sitting straight, dressed in perfect clothes, checking watches, tapping phones. She chose a seat near the end and sat down. Placing her bag neatly beside her, she tried not to compare herself, but it was hard. Their shoes were expensive. Their watches shined. Their confidence seemed effortless. She glanced at her bracelet again. Her mother's voice echoed in her mind. "Be proud." One by one, names were called. Each time, her heart jumped. She took slow breaths, counting silently to calm herself. Finally, her name was called. She stood up, smoothed her skirt, and followed the assistant down a long hallway. At the end was a large door. The assistant opened it and gestured for her to enter. She stepped inside. A long table filled the room. Several people sat behind it, papers and laptops in front of them. Their expressions were polite but unreadable. Sunlight streamed in through tall windows behind them. She greeted them, her voice steady, despite the pounding in her chest. As she took her seat, she noticed brief glances toward her wrist. Small, quick looks that lasted only a second, but she felt them. The interview began. Questions came one after another. About her experience, her skills, her decisions. Some were easy. Some were challenging. She answered honestly, clearly, drawing from years of hard work and learning. When she spoke about her struggles, she didn't complain. She spoke about growth, about lessons, about resilience. Still, she sensed a distance, a quiet judgment in the room. She kept going. She reminded herself that's why she was here. For her mother, for the promise, as the interview continued. She noticed one person at the table who had not spoken much. A man seated slightly apart, listening closely, his eyes thoughtful. He hadn't looked at her resume much. He was watching her. When their eyes met briefly, she looked away, focusing on her answer. She didn't know it yet. But this interview was not just testing her skills, it was testing her story, and the bracelet on her wrist was about to matter more than she could ever imagine. The interview room was quiet. Almost too quiet, as if every sound made by the city outside had been swallowed by the walls. She took a seat and tried to settle into her chair, adjusting her skirt and smoothing the lines of her shirt. Her hands rested on her lap, fingers lightly touching the bracelet, seeking that small connection to her mother's presence. The first questions came quickly. They asked about her experience, her education, and the roles she had held before. She answered each one with care, making sure to show competence without sounding arrogant. She explained what she had learned from every position she had held, how she handled challenges, and how she had grown in both skill and confidence. She noticed the slight nods from some panelists, brief but encouraging. Yet, there were others who seemed indifferent, as if they were already judging her based on something beyond her answers. When they asked about a time she had faced a real challenge, her mind immediately went to the moments when her mother had been sick. She spoke about the nights she had stayed awake, helping with medications, making sure everything was in order, and keeping hope alive when it felt impossible. She didn't describe herself as a victim. Instead, she told the story in a way that showed resilience, determination, and empathy. She spoke about responsibility, about taking action even when no one else could. One of the panelists, a woman with sharp eyes and a slight frown, leaned forward and asked her a difficult question about managing conflicts in the workplace. She paused for a moment, thinking about the arguments she had seen in past jobs and how she had resolved them. She answered honestly, admitting when she had made mistakes and explaining what she had learned from them. She shared strategies she had used to mediate disagreements and bring teams together. She could see the panelists scribbling notes, but her expression remained unreadable. The next question was more technical, and she could feel the tension building in the room. She was prepared, having practiced this part for weeks. She spoke clearly, step by step, showing her knowledge and understanding. As she explained, she noticed subtle changes. The woman with the frown relaxed slightly. Another man at the end of the table gave a small smile, and the quiet observer continued to watch intently. After a few minutes, they shifted to questions about personal qualities. They asked what motivated her, what she valued, and how she saw herself in the future. She spoke about integrity, honesty, and the importance of keeping promises. She talked about her desire to make a meaningful impact, not just earn money, and how she wanted to honor the people who had shaped her life. Her voice softened when she mentioned her mother. She found herself telling a short version of the story about the bracelet and the promise she had made. There was a pause. The room seemed to hold its breath. She could feel eyes on her wrist for the first time, lingering longer than before. It was a small, almost imperceptible change, but it made her heart beat faster. She looked down at the bracelet, feeling its cool weight, and silently reminded herself to stay strong. One of the panelists asked her to describe a time she had been underestimated. She thought about the countless occasions when people had judged her based on her clothes, her background, or the way she spoke. She didn't shy away from the truth. She told them how those experiences had taught her patience, humility, and the importance of showing rather than telling. She shared how she had worked harder, stayed focused, and proved herself through results rather than words. The questions kept coming, some easy, some designed to catch her off guard. At one point, a panelist asked about a failure she had experienced. She could feel the sweat forming at the back of her neck, but she remained calm. She told a story about a project that had not gone as planned, explaining the lessons learned and how she had adapted her approach in the future. She didn't make excuses. She didn't blame anyone. She showed growth, reflection, and accountability. Throughout the interview, she noticed small gestures. A nod here, a raised eyebrow there, a glance exchanged between panelists. She didn't know what they meant, but she continued answering honestly and fully, focusing on the story she wanted to tell about herself. She reminded herself that this was not just about impressing them. It was about being true to who she was. After a while, the interview took a shift towards situational questions. They asked how she would handle specific scenarios in the workplace. She listened carefully, thinking through each situation before speaking. She drew from her own experiences, both personal and professional, showing empathy, strategic thinking, and problem-solving skills. She could sense the energy in the room changing. There was still a critical eye here and there, but some faces were softening, showing interest and engagement. During a short pause, she felt a moment of doubt creep in. Her confidence wavered, and she wondered if she had said enough, if she had done well enough, if the bracelet on her wrist would be seen as a distraction rather than a symbol of strength. She closed her eyes for a second and imagined her mother's smile, felt the warmth of her hand on her own, and heard the words she had said countless times: be proud, be strong, be yourself. That small moment of reassurance helped her regain focus. She opened her eyes and took a deep breath. When the next question came, she answered with renewed clarity and conviction, letting her passion and sincerity shine through. She spoke about collaboration, innovation, and integrity, emphasizing the values that had guided her life and the promise she had kept to herself. Time seemed to stretch. Each answer, each moment, felt heavy with importance. She noticed the quiet observer shifting slightly, his attention fully on her now. There was a different energy in the room, one of curiosity and careful consideration. She continued, careful not to rush, letting her words land naturally. Finally, one of the panelists asked a question that touched her deeply: why she wanted this job. She paused, thinking about all the challenges she had faced, all the nights she had stayed up, all the dreams she had held close. Her voice grew soft but firm as she spoke about her mother, the bracelet, and the promise she had made to honor her. She spoke about wanting to make a difference, to contribute, and to grow in a place that valued people, not just profits. For a few seconds, the room was silent. She could feel the eyes on her wrist again, but this time it was different. There was no judgment. There was recognition, a subtle acknowledgement of something beyond resumes and skill sets. She felt a strange warmth, a sense that her story had reached them. The panelists moved on to closing questions, asking about her availability, her long-term goals, and how she saw herself fitting into the company culture. She answered confidently, demonstrating both readiness and humility. She could feel the tension lifting, replaced by a sense of completion. She had done all she could. She had spoken honestly, shared her story, and held on to her promise. As she stood to leave, the quiet observer finally spoke. He thanked her for her time and told her they appreciated her openness and honesty. He didn't say much more, but there was a sincerity in his voice that gave her hope. She nodded, thanked them in return, and walked out of the room. Once outside, she took a deep breath. The hallways seemed brighter, the air lighter. She touched the bracelet, feeling its cool surface and the weight of the promise she carried. The moment of judgment had passed, and though she didn't know the outcome yet, she felt a quiet confidence. She had been herself. She had honored her mother. She had shared her story as she stepped into the elevator. She looked at the people around her, some bustling past, some waiting silently. She realized that no matter what happened next, she had grown through this experience. She had faced the fear, kept the promise, and walked through the door with dignity. She smiled softly to herself. The bracelet on her wrist felt lighter now, not because it had changed, but because she had embraced it fully. It was no longer just a piece of jewelry. It was a symbol of courage, of love, of the journey she had taken and the strength she had carried with her all along. The elevator doors opened, and she walked out into the lobby. Sunlight streamed through the large glass windows, reflecting off the polished floors. She felt a moment of peace, knowing she had given everything she could. The journey was far from over, but this step had been hers entirely. She held the bracelet in her hand for a moment, feeling the smooth edges and the cool metal. Then she slipped it back onto her wrist and stood tall. Whatever happened next, she would face it with the same determination, the same honesty, and the same heart that had guided her through every challenge until now, after the interview ended. She stepped out of the room, her legs feeling both heavy and light at the same time. She walked down the long hallway, her heart still racing, replaying each question, each answer in her mind. She tried to remember exactly what she had said, how she had held herself, and if she had come across as confident enough. The bracelet on her wrist caught the sunlight as she passed the tall windows, and she felt its cool touch reminding her that she had kept her promise. She returned to the waiting area, but there were no more seats. Other candidates had finished and left, leaving the room quiet except for the faint hum of the air conditioning and the distant sounds of the city. She sat on the edge of a chair, holding her bag tightly, her eyes fixed on the floor. Her thoughts wandered, her mind replaying every detail of the interview. She questioned herself, wondering if she had said too much, too little, or if she had done enough to stand out. Minutes passed, and then a woman from the panel returned to speak with her. She introduced herself and asked if she could take a few minutes to ask one more question. Surprised but relieved, she nodded, her stomach tightening in anticipation. She followed the woman down another hallway, and they stopped in front of a glass-walled office. Inside, a man was sitting at a desk, papers neatly stacked in front of him, looking over some documents. He looked up as they entered, his eyes locking with hers. "Please have a seat," he said, his voice calm and measured. She did as she was told, feeling both nervous and curious. She noticed immediately that he did not focus on her clothes or her posture. Instead, his gaze drifted to her wrist, lingering on the bracelet she had worn for the interview. She felt a shiver run down her spine but kept her expression composed. He cleared his throat. "I understand this bracelet is important to you," he said, his voice gentle but carrying a weight that made her sit up straighter. She hesitated for a moment, unsure how much to say, but she decided honesty was the best path. She told him the story of her mother, the struggles they had faced together, and the promise she had made before her mother passed away. She spoke about the strength and courage her mother had given her, and how this simple bracelet had become a symbol of her guidance and love. He listened silently, his expression softening as she spoke. There was a pause after she finished, a silence that felt both heavy and meaningful. She looked down at the bracelet, feeling the warmth against her skin, and wondered what he was thinking. Then he spoke. "This bracelet," he said slowly, "it looks very familiar." Her eyes widened slightly. "Really?" she asked, curiosity and hope mingling. He nodded. "Yes, it's almost identical to one that belonged to my sister. She had one like this many years ago. She always believed in helping those who needed guidance, those who worked hard despite life's challenges." She felt her breath catch. "Your sister. She helped people?" she asked softly. "Yes," he replied. "She dedicated her life to supporting families, especially women who were struggling. She wanted to give them opportunities they might never have had otherwise." Her heart pounded. Could it be true? Could this man sitting in front of her, a stranger until now, have a connection to the very woman who had shaped her mother's life? She felt a wave of emotion, trying to steady herself, her eyes fixed on the bracelet as if it held all the answers. "Your mother knew my sister?" the man asked gently, leaning forward slightly. She shook her head, unsure how to respond. I don't know. I never met her, but my mother. She always spoke about helping others, about kindness and courage," she said, her voice soft but steady. He nodded slowly. "It seems your mother carried the same values my sister believed in, and you, wearing this bracelet, have carried them forward." She swallowed hard, feeling tears prick at the corners of her eyes. She had come here hoping for a job, an opportunity, a chance to prove herself. She hadn't expected to discover a connection that felt so personal, so meaningful. It was as if the universe had aligned this moment for her, bridging the past and the present. Connecting her mother's legacy with her own journey, they spoke for a long time, and the conversation shifted from personal stories to professional aspirations. She shared her vision for the role, how she hoped to contribute, and the values she wanted to bring into the workplace. He listened attentively, asking thoughtful questions and encouraging her to elaborate. With each answer, she felt a sense of validation, not just for her skills, but for the person she had become. At one point, he smiled softly and said, "It's rare to meet someone who carries such determination and integrity. You face challenges most people wouldn't understand, yet here you are, standing strong, sharing your story without hesitation." She felt a lump in her throat. For so long, she had worried that her past, her struggles, and even this bracelet would make people judge her or see her as less than. And yet, here was someone who not only understood but appreciated it. It was a moment of recognition she had never expected. He continued, "This bracelet isn't just a piece of metal. It's a symbol of resilience, courage, and love. And I can see that you embody all of that." Her hands trembled slightly as she touched it again. The weight of the words, the recognition, and the connection made her feel both vulnerable and empowered. She realized that this moment was about more than a job. It was about acknowledgement, about understanding, and about the invisible threads that linked her past to her present. They discussed the company's mission and how she could fit into it. But her mind kept returning to the bracelet, to her mother, to the promise she had made so long ago. She felt a sense of peace, knowing that she had honored her mother's memory, that the bracelet had not been a distraction, but a bridge, connecting her values with those of someone who had a shared vision for helping others. After what felt like hours, the conversation began to wind down. He stood up, extending his hand. "Thank you for sharing your story with me. It's rare to encounter someone with your integrity and perspective. You've shown courage, thoughtfulness, and a genuine desire to make a difference." She stood as well, taking his hand in hers, feeling the warmth and sincerity in the gesture. "Thank you for listening," she said, her voice steady but soft. As she walked out of the office, she felt lighter, as if a weight she hadn't realized she was carrying had been lifted. The bracelet on her wrist felt different too. Not just a symbol of her mother's promise, but a reminder that her story, her struggles, and her perseverance had value. Someone had seen it. Someone had recognized it. And it mattered. She stepped into the hallway, taking slow, deliberate breaths. The sunlight streaming through the windows seemed brighter, warmer. She realized that no matter what happened next, she had already gained something far more important than a job offer. She had found acknowledgement, validation, and a sense of connection that transcended the room, the interview, and even her own doubts. As she left the building, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. The city outside seemed alive with possibility. Each person moving with their own story, their own struggles, and their own dreams. She touched the bracelet one more time, feeling the cool metal, and whispered a quiet thank you to her mother. She had kept the promise. She had shown her strength, and now the world had taken notice too. The moment she left the office, the world outside felt almost unreal. The sun was brighter, the wind gentler, and the sounds of the city softer. As if it too had paused to honor what had just happened. She walked slowly, savoring the quiet after the tension of the interview. Her mind replaying the conversation with the man who had noticed her bracelet. Every step she took felt lighter. Yet her heart carried a strange mix of excitement and anxiety. The connection she had felt in that room was overwhelming, yet she knew there were still questions that needed answers. She kept touching the bracelet, letting the cool metal remind her of the promise she had kept and the recognition she had received. She wandered into a small cafe near the office building, needing a moment to breathe. She found a quiet corner, sat down, and ordered a cup of tea. As she waited, she reflected on her journey, the long nights of studying, the part-time jobs, the constant struggle to prove herself, and the countless times she had questioned her own worth. Each memory came with a pang, but also with pride. She had endured. She had grown. She had persisted. The cup of tea arrived, steaming and warm. She held it in her hands, feeling the heat seep into her fingers, and took a slow sip. The taste was comforting, grounding her in the present. She realized that while the interview had been important, it was the story she carried, the lessons from her mother, and the strength she had nurtured that truly mattered. Her thoughts drifted back to the man in the office. His eyes had been kind, his questions thoughtful, and his recognition of the bracelet had felt almost magical. She wondered what it was about the bracelet that had struck him so deeply. It was just a simple piece of silver, yet it carried decades of love, sacrifice, and resilience. In that moment, she understood that the true value of the bracelet was not in its appearance, but in the story it held as she sat there. Her mind buzzing with emotion, her phone buzzed in her bag. She hesitated, then reached for it. A message from the company appeared on the screen, but it wasn't the official offer she had been expecting. Instead, it was a request to come back for one final conversation with the CEO. The message was polite, almost understated, but it carried a weight she could feel through the screen. Her heart skipped a beat. This was it, the moment that could change everything. She felt a surge of both nervousness and hope. She quickly finished her tea, paid, and stepped back into the street. Her mind focused and her steps purposeful. She had one more chance to show herself, to share her vision, and perhaps to uncover the full story behind the bracelet. The building seemed taller now, more imposing, yet somehow welcoming. She took a deep breath and walked in, her hands lightly touching the bracelet. The lobby was busy, but she moved through it with calm determination. She could feel the eyes of a few people lingering on her, perhaps noticing her calm, perhaps curious about her presence. She ignored them, focusing on the path ahead. An assistant guided her back to the CEO's office. The man she had met before greeted her with a warm smile, motioning for her to sit. The room felt familiar, yet different now, charged with anticipation. The CEO began to speak, his tone thoughtful, almost contemplative. I wanted to learn more about you, he said, not just your skills, but your journey, your values, and the story you carry with you. I believe your story is not just yours. It connects to something bigger, something meaningful. Her fingers lightly tracing the bracelet, feeling its familiar weight and the memories it carried, she realized that every challenge, every struggle had led her to this moment. Every sacrifice her mother had made, every lesson she had learned, had prepared her for this encounter, he continued. Your mother, though I never met her, seems to have lived a life of quiet strength and kindness. And you, carrying this bracelet, have continued that legacy. There is something rare about that. Something that goes beyond resumes and interviews. Her eyes welled up slightly. She had never expected to hear words like these. To have her life and her mother's sacrifices acknowledged in such a profound way. She took a deep breath, steadying herself, and spoke softly about her mother, the bracelet, and the promise she had kept. She didn't hide her emotions, but she spoke with clarity and conviction. Letting the story flow naturally, the CEO listened silently, nodding occasionally, his expression one of deep thought and understanding. He asked questions not about her skills, but about her vision for the future, her hopes, and how she wanted to contribute to the world. She spoke honestly, passionately, and without hesitation. Drawing from her experiences and the lessons she had learned along the way, hours seemed to pass, though it was likely far less. Time had lost its usual pace, replaced by a focus on connection and understanding. She realized that this conversation was different from any interview she had ever experienced. It wasn't about testing her knowledge or skills. It was about understanding the person she had become, the values she carried, and the impact she could make at one point. He leaned forward slightly and said, "This bracelet, and the story behind it, is extraordinary. It reminds me of my sister who believed deeply in helping others and supporting those who needed guidance. Your mother must have shared the same vision, and you, continuing that legacy, have shown courage, resilience, and a commitment to making a difference." Tears slipped quietly down her cheeks, but she didn't try to hide them. She felt a sense of relief, recognition, and validation that she had never known. The bracelet, which had always been a source of comfort and memory, had now become a bridge between her past and the present. Connecting her mother's values with someone who truly understood them, they spoke more, discussing how she could contribute, what she hoped to achieve, and the potential for collaboration. The conversation was rich, meaningful, and inspiring. She felt seen in a way she never had before, recognized not just for her skills, but for her integrity, resilience, and heart. As the discussion drew to a close, the CEO smiled warmly. "I want you to know that your story, your journey, and the values you carry are remarkable. We are not just offering a position. We are welcoming someone who embodies the principles we believe in." Her heart raced. She had come seeking an opportunity, a chance to prove herself, but she had received far more. She had been acknowledged, validated, and connected to something larger than herself. The bracelet on her wrist felt heavier with meaning now, a symbol not just of her mother's love, but of the recognition and respect she had earned. She stood, feeling a mix of emotions, gratitude, pride, and an overwhelming sense of fulfillment. She thanked the CEO, her voice steady, despite the tears threatening to spill. She left the office with a heart full of hope and a mind brimming with possibility. The city outside seemed alive, every sound and movement carrying a sense of promise. She walked down the streets, feeling the bracelet on her wrist, knowing that she had honored her mother, kept her promise, and shared her story in a way that mattered. The moment had been transformative, not just for her career, but for her sense of self, her understanding of her worth, and the realization that love, integrity, and resilience could create connections that changed lives. As she reached the edge of the street, sunlight warming her face, she took a deep breath and smiled. The journey was far from over, but she had taken a step that would shape her path forever. The bracelet glinted in the light, not just a piece of metal, but a symbol of courage, love, and the extraordinary power of a promise kept. She felt ready for whatever came next, knowing that her story, her heart, and her values would guide her through every challenge and every opportunity to come. The following morning, she woke with a mixture of excitement and nervous anticipation. The events of the previous day kept playing in her mind. The conversation with the CEO, the acknowledgement of her mother's legacy, and the significance of the bracelet. Every detail felt alive, as if the world itself had shifted. Making space for the possibilities that were now before her, she dressed carefully, the bracelet snug against her wrist, and stepped out into the cool morning air. The city felt different today, brighter, almost expectant. Each step toward the office seemed to echo with potential. She knew this was the day she would receive the final answer, and while part of her worried, another part felt certain that her journey had already changed in profound ways. Upon arriving at the building, she was greeted warmly by the receptionist, who seemed genuinely happy to see her. She took the elevator up to the executive floor, her heart beating steadily, but with a sense of calm determination. Today, she realized, was not just about a job. It was about validation, recognition, and the realization that the life she had worked tirelessly to build was being acknowledged. The CEO's office door opened. She stepped inside. The man she had spoken with the day before smiled warmly. This time, there was a sense of ease in the room, a quiet energy of expectation that felt both comforting and thrilling. "Please, sit," he said, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. She complied, adjusting her posture, her hands resting lightly in her lap, fingers brushing the bracelet. He looked at her with a thoughtful expression. "I wanted to speak with you one last time before we make a decision," he said. "There's something important I want to share with you." She leaned forward slightly, curious, her breath catching as she waited. "You carry with you not just skills and knowledge, but a story," he continued. "A story of resilience, courage, and love. Your mother's bracelet represents more than a memory. It represents the strength and values that have shaped you, and that in itself is extraordinary." Her heart swelled. She felt a warmth spread through her chest, a mix of pride, relief, and gratitude. She had long worried that her past, her struggles, and even this simple bracelet might be seen as weaknesses. Yet here was someone recognizing them as the foundation of her strength. He reached into a drawer and pulled out a small, neatly folded envelope. "This is an official offer for the position," he said, sliding it across the desk. "But more than that, it's an opportunity for you to continue the work your mother believed in, to bring the values you cherish into a place that will support and amplify them." Her hands trembled slightly as she took the envelope. She carefully opened it and read the details, each word confirming what her heart already hoped. The offer was generous, fair, and filled with opportunities for growth and contribution. She looked up, tears brimming in her eyes, unable to hold back the emotions that had been building inside her for so long. "I don't know what to say," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Say what you feel," he replied gently. "You've earned this through your hard work, your integrity, and your courage. The bracelet you wear is more than a symbol. It's a testament to the journey you've taken and the values you carry. And we see that." She nodded, tears spilling quietly down her cheeks. She felt a sense of closure and fulfillment unlike anything she had experienced before. The struggles, the sacrifices, the moments of doubt, they all led to this moment. The bracelet, once a simple piece of silver, had become a symbol of triumph, love, and recognition. After a few moments, he spoke again, his tone soft but filled with meaning. "I also want to share something with you about the bracelet itself. My sister, who inspired so much of what we do here, had one just like it. She believed in the power of small symbols to remind us of our values and our purpose. Seeing you wear it, seeing the story it carries, made me realize how interconnected our efforts are, how one person's dedication can touch so many lives." Her heart raced, a profound sense of connection washing over her. The bracelet was no longer just a memory of her mother. It was a bridge connecting her to a larger mission, a community, a legacy that she could now contribute to. They spent the next hour discussing her role, her responsibilities, and her vision for the future. She shared ideas she had nurtured for years, insights she had gained through experience, and a desire to make a meaningful impact. He listened intently, asking questions, encouraging her to explore her thoughts fully. Each exchange reinforced her confidence and reaffirmed that this opportunity was meant for her. When the conversation concluded, she stood to leave, feeling a sense of peace and accomplishment. She shook hands with the CEO, his grip firm and sincere, silent acknowledgement of her journey, her courage, and her potential. She left the office with the envelope in her bag, the bracelet glinting in the sunlight, and a heart full of hope outside. The city felt alive in a way she had never noticed before. People moved with purpose, cars passed in a rhythmic flow, and the air carried a sense of promise. She walked slowly, savoring each moment, each breath, and each sensation, aware of the weight of what had just occurred. She had not only secured a job, but had also received recognition, connection, and validation that would stay with her forever. She paused by a small park on the way home, watching children play and families gather. The scene reminded her of her mother, of the lessons about kindness, resilience, and love that had been instilled in her from a young age. She felt a deep sense of gratitude for the journey, the hardships, and the guidance that had led her to this moment. The bracelet on her wrist felt like a talisman, carrying not only memories, but also the promise of the future. As she walked home, she reflected on everything she had endured: the late nights, the part-time jobs, the moments of doubt, and the quiet perseverance that had brought her here. Each challenge had shaped her, each setback had taught her, and each small victory had built the foundation for this success. She felt a profound sense of fulfillment knowing that her journey had been meaningful, that her mother's values had been honored, and that she was stepping into a role where she could make a difference. When she reached her apartment, she sat by the window, looking out at the city skyline, the bracelet catching the last rays of the setting sun. She held it gently, feeling its cool surface and the warmth of the memories it carried. She whispered a quiet thank you to her mother, to the woman who had given her strength, guidance, and a promise to uphold. Tears flowed freely now, but they were tears of joy, relief, and gratitude. She realized that success was not just about achieving goals or earning recognition. It was about staying true to oneself, honoring those who had shaped us, and carrying forward the values that define our character. The bracelet, once a simple object, had become a symbol of all that she had learned and all that she was yet to achieve. She leaned back in her chair, closing her eyes and allowing herself to feel the full weight of the moment. The journey had been long, the path challenging, but every step had been worth it. She had faced fear, embraced vulnerability, and remained steadfast in her values. And now she was ready for the next chapter, armed with experience, wisdom, and a heart full of courage. As night fell, the city lights twinkled like a sea of possibilities. She looked at the bracelet one last time for the evening, feeling its significance deeply. It was more than metal. It was love, resilience, and promise. It was a reminder that no matter the obstacles, integrity and courage would always be recognized and rewarded. With a deep breath, she set the bracelet on her wrist and smiled. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, and new experiences. But she knew she would face them with the same strength, honesty, and determination that had brought her here. The bracelet would always be a reminder of where she came from, the love that shaped her, and the extraordinary journey that had led to this moment. She was ready for everything the future held, knowing that she carried not only her mother's legacy, but also her own story, her own courage, and her own heart into the world.